Before we get to the upcoming video, Noam Chomsky has critiqued mainstream media and political discourse for what he sees as narrow boundaries of acceptable debate. He argues that within the framework set by corporate-owned media and powerful interests, there is a limited spectrum of views allowed to be expressed, effectively constraining the range of acceptable opinions and ideas. Now, off to this very informative clip of Noam Chomsky, and following some more of his thoughts on propaganda.
C.P. Otero, who's edited a collection of your essays entitled Radical Priorities, has written in the preface of that book, and this may startle a lot of people, the totalitarian system of thought control is far less effective than a democratic one, since the official doctrine parroted by the intellectuals at the service of the state is readily identifiable as pure propaganda. And this helps free the mind. In contrast, he writes, the democratic system seeks to determine and limit the entire spectrum of thought by leaving the fundamental assumptions unexpressed. They are presupposed but not asserted.
Yeah, that's quite accurate. I've also written about that many times. I mean, just think about it simply. Say, take a country which is at the opposite spectrum from us, the Soviet Union, domestically. That's a country run by the bludgeon, essentially. It's a command state. The state controls. Everybody basically follows orders. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but essentially that's the way it works. Well, there it's very easy to determine what propaganda is. What the state produces is propaganda. I mean, that's the kind of thing that Orwell described in 1984. Not a very good book, incidentally, a very bad book. One of the reasons why it's popular is because it's so kind of trivial. And another reason it's popular is that it's talking about our enemies. So that makes it popular. If he was dealing with a serious problem, ourselves, then it wouldn't have been popular. In fact, it would probably not have been published. In a country like that, where there's a kind of ministry of truth, propaganda is very easily identifiable. Everybody knows what it is, and you can choose to repeat it if you like, but basically it's not really trying to control your thought very much. It's giving you the party line. It's saying, here's the official doctrine. As long as you don't disobey, you won't get in trouble. But what you think is not of great importance to anyone. If you get out of line, we'll do something to you because we have force. Well, now democratic societies can't really work like that, because the state can't control behavior by force. I mean, it can to some extent, but to a much more it's much more limited in its capacity to control by force. It therefore has to control what you think. And again, democratic theorists have understood this for 50, 60 years, and very articulate about it. If the voice of the people is heard, you better control what that voice says, meaning you have to control what they think. Now, the method that Otero mentions there is one of the major methods. One of the ways in which you control what people think is by creating a debate. So it looks like there's a debate going on, but making sure that that debate stays within very narrow margins. Namely, you have to make sure that the debate, both sides in the debate, accept certain assumptions. And those assumptions turn out to be the propaganda system. As long as everyone accepts the propaganda system, then you can have a debate. So take, for example, the Vietnam War is a classic example. I mean, in the official media, say, in the major media, say the New York Times or CBS or whatever, in fact, all across the spectrum except at the very far out periphery, which reaches almost no one. But in the major media, which reached the overwhelming majority of the population, there was a lively debate. It was between people who called doves and people called hawks. The people called hawks said, if we keep at it, we can win. The people called doves said, even if we keep at it, we probably can't win, and besides, it would probably be too costly for us, and besides, maybe we're killing too many people, something like that. Now, both sides, the doves and the hawks, agreed on something. We have a right to carry out aggression against South Vietnam. In fact, they didn't even admit that that was taking place. They called it the defense of South Vietnam, using defense for aggression in the standard Orwellian case. We were, in fact, attacking South Vietnam just as much as the Russians are attacking Afghanistan. And in fact, very similar. Like them, we first established a government that invited us in, and until we found one, we had to overturn government after government. Finally, we got one that invited us in after we'd been there for years. And then we attacked the countryside and the population. That's an aggression. Nobody thought that was wrong. Or rather, anyone who thought that was wrong was not admitted to the discussion. If you're a dove, you're in favor of aggression. If you're a hawk, you're in favor of aggression. The debate between the hawks and doves, then, is purely tactical. Can we get away with it? Moderately on grounds of is it too bloody or too costly, which is kind of irrelevant. I mean, the real point is that aggression is wrong. Like when the Russians invaded Czechoslovakia, that was wrong. They got away with it. They didn't kill anybody, but it was wrong because aggression is wrong. We all understand that. But you can't allow that understanding to be expressed when it relates to the violent actions of our state, obviously. Now, if this was a totalitarian state, the Ministry of Truth would have simply said, it's right for us to go into Vietnam, period. Don't argue with me. People would have known that that's the propaganda system, and they could have thought whatever they wanted. They could have seen that we're attacking Vietnam, just like we can see that that the Russians are attacking Afghanistan. You couldn't permit that understanding of reality in this country. It's too dangerous. People are much freer. They can express themselves. They can do things. So therefore, it was necessary to try to control thought, to make it appear as if the only issue is a tactical one. Can we get away with it? There's no issue of right or wrong. Now that partially worked, but not entirely. Among the educated part of the population, it worked almost totally. There are good studies of this which show that among the more educated parts of the population, the government propaganda system was accepted unquestioningly, with only the most marginal statistical error. On the other hand, after a long period of popular spontaneous opposition and dissent and organization, the general population got out of control. And in fact, as recently as 1982, the latest polls I've seen, in 1982, over 70% of the population still was saying that the war was, I'm now quoting the wording of the poll, the Gallup poll, the war was fundamentally wrong and immoral, not a mistake. That is, the overwhelming majority of the population is neither hawks nor doves. They're opposed to aggression. On the other hand, the educated part of the population, they're in line. For them, it's just a tactical question of hawk versus dove. Now, this is incidentally not untypical. Propaganda very often works better for the educated than it does for the uneducated. This is true on many issues. There are a lot of reasons for this. One reason being that the educated they receive more of it. You know, they receive more of the propaganda because they read more. Another thing is that they are the agents of propaganda. After all, their job is commissars. They're supposed to be the agents of the propaganda system, so they believe it. It's very hard to say something unless you believe it. And the other reasons are that they're just part of the privileged elite, by and large. So they share their interests and perceptions, whereas the population is more marginalized. It, by and large, doesn't participate in the democratic system, which is an elite game overwhelmingly. And people learn from their own lives, you know, to be skeptical. And in fact, most of them are. There's a lot of skepticism and dissent and so on. But this is a typical example. Here's a case which is an interesting one because while the technique of thought control worked very effectively, in fact, to virtually 100% effectiveness among the educated part of the population, after many years of atrocities and massacre and hundreds of thousands of people killed and so on, it began to erode among the general population. There's even a name for that. It's called the Vietnam Syndrome, a grave disease. You know, people understand too much. But it's very striking, very illuminating to see how well it worked among the educated. In American history, to pick up a book on American history and look at the Vietnam War, there is no such event as the American attack against South Vietnam. I mean, it's as if in the Soviet Union, say in the early part of the 21st century, nobody will have ever said there was a Russian invasion of Afghanistan. Everyone said it's a Russian defense of Afghanistan. That's not going to happen. In fact, already people talk about the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. Maybe they defend it, maybe not, but they admit that it exists. But in the United States, where the indoctrination system is vastly more effective, the educated part of the population can't even see that it exists. We cannot see that there was an American invasion of South Vietnam. And it's out of history, down Orwell's memory.
Chomsky's perspective on this issue is largely informed by his theory of manufacturing consent, developed in collaboration with Edward S. Herman. They argued that mass media, through various mechanisms like ownership structures, advertising revenue, and reliance on official sources, effectively shape public opinion to serve the interests of those in power. According to Chomsky, this limited scope of debate often excludes viewpoints that challenge dominant narratives or threaten established power structures. He contends that genuine dissent and alternative perspectives are marginalized or ignored, leading to a homogenized public discourse that fails to adequately address important social, political, and economic issues. Chomsky's critiques of media and political discourse have been influential in shaping discussions about media bias, propaganda, and the role of dissent in democratic societies. He emphasizes the importance of independent journalism, grassroots, activism, and critical thinking in challenging the status quo and expanding the boundaries of acceptable debate. Well, I hope you liked the video and give the channel a subscribe. If you wish, you can join the channel as a member, it would be greatly appreciated. Also, if you would check out and subscribe to my other channel, Progressive Movement, link is on the homepage and in the comment section, thank you. Now, take care and bye-bye.